What's today? Is it Tuesday? I think it's Tuesday. Hello and welcome aboard the Paul Gallant Show, the most interactive sports talk show in Houston, as you heard Voice Guy say. Yeah, it is Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. Yesterday was the Houston Astros World Series parade. And if you're watching this show on Twitch, twitch.tv/ESPN 97.5, you'd notice two things. Number one, I'm wearing a hat. That means I haven't showered. Number two, I'm wearing sunglasses. It's too bright in here. Yesterday was a lot of fun. I don't know if my body feels the same way, though. The mental side, we were strong. The actual, hey, can you handle drinking a whole bottle of champagne during a radio show? Can you handle drinking vodka Red Bulls anymore? Can you handle merely walking into Shot Bar Houston where you haven't been for like 5 to 6 years? Those are questions that I'm not 100% sure of. Sean Mapes is behind the glass. Sean, it is good to see your face for today's show. How do I look? Like scale of 1 to 10.
Let me get a closer look in the Twitch. Like a 5, 6.
I appreciate that. I do not feel it at all.
I mean, the sunglasses and hat are blocking most of your face and eyes, which I imagine that's the tough part. But, you look in the T-shirt, beard looks nice.
You say it's the tough part. That's the key part. I don't want anyone to see the bags.
And you're doing a great job hiding it.
Thank you very much. I woke up at 10:45, passed out on my couch. Again, I don't really know what led up to that. I then woke up at 2:30 thinking to myself, all right, time to go into work. Because this daylight savings time stuff has me completely bamboozled. I keep on thinking to myself, wait, what time is it? What day is it? It's been an interesting last couple of ones. I hope that you guys all had fun yesterday if you were out at the parade. By the time my show was done, it seemed like a lot of people were walking back towards where we did the show at Cobos Q, which was a blast. Big shout out to them hosting our little party. Once the parade was done, that place was bumping. It was packed, like shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow. And I was talking with the guys who run Cobos Q, and they were telling me, yeah, it wasn't quite right after the World Series where I think Dr. Dre on 290 actually got essentially employed as a deputy bouncer to keep people from climbing over the fence to get into Cobos Q. So it was an absolute bleep show, which is fantastic. But you guys behaved in a way that Philadelphia maybe quite wouldn't. We'll talk about some of the highlights of the parade over the course of this morning. It doesn't sound like anyone punched a horse or ate poop, though it did seem like a lot of y'all had some climbing ability. We also saw, once again, a hat drop, toss up to the top of a parking lot. And you think to yourself right now, okay, this is where we continue to celebrate, right? Oh, Paul's got his glasses on. He's got his hat on. Maybe there's no alcohol in the Yeti that he brought into the studio, but we're going to keep celebrating, right? That's where you're wrong. Now, if you listen to this program, I consider you, like me, to be an acolyte of the Church of Tom Brady, our Lord and Savior. Back in 2002, after winning his first Super Bowl, Tom Brady was asked by Steve Sable of NFL Films about Dan Marino making it to a Super Bowl his rookie season and never getting back into the big game. Tom Brady said this.
I had an equipment manager in college, and he had been at Michigan for 25 years or so. He's got so many Big Ten rings. I mean, he doesn't have enough fingers for all the rings he's got. And he says, you know what? Whenever he says, you know what, Tom, you know what my favorite ring is? And I said, which one's that? He goes, the next one. That's what I think, the next one. That's my favorite.
Legitimately, back in 2002, I don't think anyone thought at that point that Tom Brady would win all of the Super Bowls, the 6 more that he was able to win after that. But now it's on to the 3rd title. We are focusing on that right now. That is what makes us of the Paul Gallant Show different. Yeah, we had fun. Yeah, we partied. We're already on to 2023. What's going to happen next year? Is Dusty Baker going to be back? What about Justin Verlander? What do the Astros do with their free agents? So 713-780-3776 to call or text. We're already on to 2023. What's the biggest focus for the Houston Astros right now as this offseason begins? We'll start by trying to parse what Justin Verlander was saying in the clubhouse after the Astros actually won the World Series. Verlander, when asked by Mark Berman of Fox 26, said that he couldn't have written a better story when it comes to coming back from Tommy John surgery and ending this season with likely a Cy Young award and, of course, another World Series victory.
Many wonderful moments in your career. Where does this one stack up?
Probably the pinnacle. I mean, just this ride I've been on, and coming back from Tommy John, and to have my first season back in like this, just, I couldn't have written the story better myself.
He sounds emotional. Couldn't have written a better story myself. Does he get the sense that maybe this is the end of his time in Houston? I think you hear that. There's a couple of ways you can interpret that if you really want to overanalyze that Justin Verlander clip. Clearly he's emotional. Obviously they just won a World Series. Maybe we go a little bit further. Mark Berman asked him another question.
An amazing end to one hell of a journey for me, going back to the beginning of my Tommy John. Obviously this isn't the end when I say end of my career.
It's not the end of his career. It's been a journey. He is talking about it somewhat in the past tense, and you do have to wonder what's next on that front. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm overanalyzing it, but I would like to see Justin Verlander pick up the option on his contract. He's not going to. He shouldn't. He's about to win the Cy Young Award. What I'm hearing there, though, is a guy who seems to be putting a period on his time in Houston. I hope I'm overanalyzing it. I really am. And again, we're talking about like minutes after they won the World Series. That's where those clips are from. Sean Mapes behind the glass, the professor. Were you hearing anything that you could perhaps interpret that could allow you to read the crystal ball of Justin Verlander's future?
I mean, when he says it's an amazing end, and then he goes, well, not the end of my career. It's like, well, what is ending then, Justin? Like, I get it. The champagne's flowing, like you said. It's minutes after he's in the locker room. But also, what do you mean by that? It's the end. End of what?
Right.
End of this, like, Tommy John, chapter of your baseball life, or the Houston Astros part?
The true emotions come out when the champagne is flowing in a setting like that. And I don't think that Verlander is going to use that opportunity a la Garrett Cole to sort of set the agenda for what's next this offseason. Could be wrong on that front. He could be playing a little bit of hardball. Jim Crane is the owner of the Houston Astros. We all seem to believe that because Jim Crane is here, that Justin Verlander is at the very least a good possibility that he'll be on the roster for next year. Here is Jim Crane after the World Series victory on Saturday night being asked about Verlander's future.
Well, we'll see where we go. I mean, what he wants to do, and I think he wants to stay here. He's got a good chance to win here, continue to win here for another few years, and we'll see where it goes. We haven't really talked about it yet, but we will soon.
I'm very curious as to how those conversations go. And it really is up to Verlander at this point. You have established yourself as one of the best pitchers in baseball history, arguably the best pitcher of your era. You've now won multiple World Series with the Houston Astros. You have your first World Series win. What's next for you? Is it just pitching as long as you possibly can? Or are you trying to be baseball's Tom Brady? Do you want to get 300 wins, as brought up in the Twitch chat, twitch.tv/ESPN975? I believe it's Pinche that brought it up. Where else is he going to have a better opportunity to win 300 games, which is something that has not been done. It does not seem like it's going to ever be done again, just based off of the way that you see some of these pitchers not have the longest innings, not pitching that long into their career, Tommy John surgeries that guys have to have, not being able to come back. Like, I do think that as far as going forward and winning, this is the place to be. It does feel like Kate Upton likes it here. It's not like she is perhaps a la in Russell Wilson with Ciara's case, sick of Seattle, wanting to move somewhere else. That was a factor in, I think, Russell Wilson's desire to get out of town. Sorry to bring things back to Seattle. Just making a comparison here as far as people with famous significant others. Sometimes they want to go somewhere else. What would Verlander potentially want? Is it worth it to get some more money? I mean, obviously, money's great. Who's going to say no to more money? Especially if somebody offers a lot of money. But where do you think he would actually want to go? Is he going to go to the Yankees? Would the Yankees sign him just for the sake of taking something away from the Houston Astros? I'm not really 100% sure that the Yankees would do that, by the way. They don't seem to be the same, hey, we're going to throw bags of money at people that they had been 10 years ago or so. They just don't feel that way anymore. Now, I think the Jacoby Ellsbury contract, you take a look at that one, amongst others, you're thinking to yourself, all right, do you really want to be stuck on the end of that if you are New York? They've been operating a little bit more, quote, fiscally responsible or, quote, cheap, whatever you want to call it. I don't know that Verlander would necessarily end up there. Verlander is definitely decision number one, but is there anything else offseason-wise that the Astros should be thinking as far as that big next decision? Because we're on to 2023.
Live from the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's Paul Gallant.
You gotta come back. You gotta come back for a repeat, right?
Well, I said if I win one, I want to win two.
The best part about that is Dusty Baker gave a wink at the very end of it. That's courtesy of our guy, Big Sarge Sports on Twitter. Dusty Baker's going to be back, but what are the other big decisions that the Houston Astros have to make this offseason? On the most interactive sports talk show in Houston, one texter asked this question at 713-780-3776 on the HRNP listener line. If you were the GM, Paul, what would your decision be on Verlander? I've hinted at it. Think about it from this perspective. You have about, given that the luxury tax threshold is $233 million, about, since your payroll for 2023, at least right now, with a bunch of free agents that we'll get to in a second, is $166 million. You got like $64 million to play with. You got to figure out what you're going to do with Michael Brantley. I feel like you probably let him walk because of the shoulder stuff. He made $16 million last year. You got to be able to sign him to a discount. Yuli Gurriel, I think that they'll have a conversation about trying to bring him back, but he's going to be 38 years old. Christian Vasquez, Martin Maldonado, Aledmus Diaz, the guys that I'm not really that concerned about from a free agent perspective, Will Smith, Rafael Montero. I think Jason Castro is essentially retired, so those are a couple of guys to think about. You also do have a couple of young catching prospects, Yanier Diaz, Corey Lee, that might be able to help you replace one, if not both, Maldonado and Vasquez. But back to Verlander. You can win without Verlander. It's not the best optic to necessarily let him walk, but if it turns into a game of hardball and he's going to be looking for north of 3 years, $43 million a year, which is what Max Scherzer got from the New York Mets, 3 years, $130 million. Are you going to be willing to spend like 2/3 of what you have available before you go over the luxury tax threshold on just Justin Verlander when you have the ridiculous depth of pitching under team control that you have right now? If it gets to a point where maybe not it's contention, but a point of he's looking for like 45, 50 a year, I'm thinking to myself, like a couple of other texters brought up, I want a bat. I want a bat that I can put in center field. Some people online were saying Chas McCormick earned a spot for next season. He did play very well in the postseason, don't get me wrong, but that doesn't always last. Remember back in 2015 during the playoffs when Colby Rasmus had an incredible year, and then they brought him back for, I think, an arbitration year of something like $19 million. I forget what the contract number was. Rasmus wasn't the same guy. I don't know that you want to expect you should be projecting Chas McCormick, you know? So I feel like center field, having a guy that is capable of playing that position but also isn't going to be dead weight in your lineup for most of the regular season, that's what I'm looking at. And if it means Verlander and $45 million is something I'm not going to do, I'm willing to walk away from that. Sean, what you got?
I just think that Justin Verlander, whatever his deal is, I think it's a situation where you can have him back, but if the price is too high that you can't do the other thing, getting another outfielder, or at least locking up Kyle Tucker.
That's the other thing, too.
Something like that. If the Verlander deal that you sign keeps you from doing those two things, you can't bring him back.
Right.
Because of that depth of pitching.
Yes, 100%. King of all Twitches says, Tucker isn't breaking the bank this year. He's arbitration. That's true, but do you want to take care of the deal ahead of time? Can you take care of the deal ahead of time? That's going to be an interesting discussion as well. I do think that there is something to be said for rewarding your players who have done a good job for you. And if you want to keep, managing this thing as responsibly as you should, you probably shouldn't open up those negotiations with Kyle Tucker. But the longer you wait, how much more is he going to be looking for?